Now that you've got all the basics down, you've learned about everything related to the basics of how a film is made. We're going to look at the final process on how films make it to the theater, and we'll go through all the steps one more time. It'll be a good reminder about how things are handled in the movies and how it's made into a business. We've got 3 stages of film: the pre-production, where everything is planned out, the script is pretty well prepared. The production is next, and in the production process, there are 3 stages, and those are shooting the actual film needed, processing the film, and then projecting it into a final format. Looking at the format, there's a gauge or width to the film stock, and at first, we'll look at how the perforations are made in the film to make it run properly, and then there's post-production, where the actual editing took place. So we'll be looking at that as well. This is an actual slide of what it used to be with the physical film being displayed in a movie theater or anywhere else, a system where the film physically went through the system, through sprockets in front of a lens. One part of it would capture the image, another part would capture the sound and sync them up, and it goes to a take-up reel. And if anything happened in this process, the film would stop in the theater, and it happened quite often that you'd see that a film had broken and someone would suddenly just disappear off screen to the next scene. So little things like that made it a cumbersome approach to displaying an art form in a theater. But let's look at size in film stock. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of film displayed here. Each has a width to it, starting out with 8 millimeter, then Super 8 was just a little bit bigger. 16 millimeters, but they would use at the university level to train students to work with film, whether it was any kind of production approach to creating a movie. Then the more sophisticated professional ones is at 35 millimeter, and of course the top notch at the early part of film was 70 millimeter and a very wide screen to work with. So each had to develop and be measured and work into the film approach. They had to know the film stock to make it work for them. When digital technology came along, it became electronic, computerized, much simpler to grab images and store them compared to the physical film where you had to develop it, hope the development of the film held, that it was all top quality. So they had to reshoot certain scenes or moments every once in a while because of a bad film stock. That won't happen with the digital process, which records it in more of a non-linear space, as they say, where things are flexible because of the way it is recorded and stored. It goes to a flash card of some sort, or a computer hard drive, or a storage unit of some sort, where all the pixels are stored, and it's massive because of the size of the image that they're recording. It is more versatile, it is easier to use, it's cheaper to process than film. It's there all the time unless something bad happens to the storage unit. It uses less light, don't need to cart around or rely on ambient light to make it process right. And even if it's shot at a lower quality, it can be manipulated in the digital stage to make it look better. Film versus digital. Film stock is physical. It must be stored. It must be protected from harsh weather, either too extreme of a heat or cold would ruin the film stock. They keep it in a cool temperature to maintain the quality. Digital is virtual, and because it's virtual, it's stored in a much smaller space based on a file rather than a physical entity. Computer manipulated digital requirements don't need processing like a film does. It requires rendering and other, more technical aspects, but not the same as film. Film has a particular aesthetic to it. It gives it a certain higher quality than digital, but digital can duplicate that through layering and creating the effect that makes it special as well. So the key factor for digital conversion is economic. It is easier to store. It's not as demanding on time, but it can be challenging in other ways. Digital distribution is also cost effective. You don't have to physically put film into a canister and ship it to all the many theaters where it will be displayed. Digital can be done through a computer internet service, special space in the internet. It can be used to transfer and display it in a movie theater. Pirating, the way to think of this is that digital formats are perfect all the time, which means unless it's protected through encrypting or some sort of computer processing, it can be pirated, and that pirated version can be perfect, not like they're dubbing off a film and then using that to sell. It's much more reliable quality-wise. So Hollywood has been using digital systems. That's how you see a film in the theaters now. And it's growing all the time as far as how much is used in movie theaters. Compared to this figure here, it is getting almost to the 100% level of feature films are digitally edited and digitally broadcast in a theater. But that's now. In 1931, they start to take control of the movie industry through certain procedures. The Motion Picture Patents Company, MPPC, exists for 7 years and helps develop standards for films to follow so that everything is done in a professional manner. Hollywood attracts the best filmmakers, the best actors to go on the screen because it means money at that time and even more money today. Studios dominate during this time period. They are more of a mogul where they hire a producer. Producers create the revenue to create the film. The profits go to the studio. Central produced systems value quantity over quality. So that's the negative related to the studio system. It's there to make a profit. If it doesn't make a profit, the studios will suffer and people will not get paid. After 1931, it is a producer unit system. The producers control the money, therefore they control how it flows and movies are created. They favor a standardized look to films at this time. They have to meet certain flow standards, make it easy for the audience to enjoy it. It established a collaborative industrial mode of production that it was meant to create what's called vertical integration, and we'll talk about that soon, where they made money by controlling the flow from one element to another element in the film industry. The golden age, as we mentioned before in the history, the 1940s, when it's wrapping up, you have studios that are called majors. Other studios are called minors. There are B studios, which are very cheap movies being made, and then you have the independent producers creating their own movies on the side with whatever they could find. So the majors at first are Paramount, MGM, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, RKO. So those are the majors. The minors were Universal, Columbia, United Artists. Here's the list of the B studios. Some produced some very significant films, others not much. And the studios are vertically integrated so that the studios control the money flow, the product flow. Theaters had to get it from the studios or they had nothing to show. And producers dominate at that time. So the structure of the studio system until 1950, this is a little look at it. You can look at those on your own. Notice that the independent producers include the Walt Disney Studios. Actual physical studios are called dream factories, where they manufacture great products, where they have huge studios that have sets, guarded areas, guarded gates to keep people out. For instance, MGM had 117 acres to work with. That's about 10 miles of paved streets. 137 totally self-contained buildings. They had an air conditioning system, soundproof soundstage, almost an acre of floor space in some areas. MGM produced about 50 full-length features every year, 100 shorts. The shorts would be films that are probably under an hour to even maybe 15 minutes to a half hour. And they employed 5,000 people, so pretty significant in the day and the age. Television comes along, there's a world war, things start to change as far as the business flow, and this chart represents the number of feature films produced from the 1930s into the 1950s. You can see a continual decline in the number of films created every year. Then the independent system starts, 1930s or so. They start slow, they don't pick up steam for quite a few years, but it allows for an independence in content in the film, not following all the standards established in Hollywood. It means the producers team had an executive producer, a line producer, associates that made a difference, and assistant producers. So they had to be creative and innovative to make money because of the salary situation and the lack of funds to create independent films. Now the key part as far as how the Hollywood or studio system works, or the entire film industry, created unions. So if you belong to the cinematographer's union, it means you couldn't do studio operations or touch certain things, only what you were organized through a union to do. So just looking at these, 1926, there's a Studio Basic Agreement. You have the Screen Actors Guild formed in 1933. Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, the technical end, way back in 1916. Cinematographers, 1918. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which really got the Academy Awards going, 1927. And editors, way out in 1950. So quite a few number of years go through, but labor, union organization rules the industry. Vertical integration, studio system had direct or indirect costs. There was no governing of it. There was no financing of it. It was totally controlled by the studios until the governments would step in. The independent system created budgets. So this is kind of important. Above the line costs, or 30% of the budget was above the line, below the line 70%. So this is more administrative. This 70% is the actual making of the movie. So it costs about $100 million to make a movie. That's the standard set. So that $100,700,000 would go to the actual making of the film, financing, and management 30%. And it has been highly creative, which means a higher quality film, and this eventually would make the system change. Marketing and distribution, prints are ordered, they're screened, and have a test audience look at films. They also do focus groups, so they'll try new things and see how the audience reacts. If the audience reacts negatively, they'd cut it out of a film and go with what was a proven product. Independent producers have different distribution options, but we're always fighting the studio system for space in theaters to make a profit. Professionals are in charge of advertising, how the films are distributed and exhibited in theaters. MPAA movie rating system. This is the current one. We're going to go over each and how it's changed. But when you go to a movie, you find out what the rating is to see if it's appropriate for young people or others, or if there's too much violence, you'd be aware of it from this. Here's the first rating system. We had a general audience, parental guidance, then we had R for being restricted, and X for being inappropriate for anyone under the age of 17. X usually involved foul language, great violence or nudity, and sexual implications. Restricted was less, but still might contain nudity in some form, but not as abrasive as the X. This didn't seem to catch on well. The double X, the triple X are more related to porn films, the ability to show actual sex acts or, inappropriate incidences that were done in reality. The current rating system now is G, PG, just as the other, and then with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, PG-13 comes in because it was just a little too extreme for a young audience. Then you have R, which is the same as this R, and then NC-17 replaces the X standards. Production in Hollywood today, there's a mixture of the studio system and the independent system. Independent system created some great movies that won top awards, and that helped the system to change. So there's no longer the golden age where it was totally controlled by the studio system. Now it's more independent, organized to finance the film, to make a better film, and that has become the standard. Major studios are defined how the nature of the U.S. movie production is done, but that's followed by independent producers as well. So to wrap this up really quick, you have CGI, you have all these new technological advancements, the creation of different senses through it, but in the end, these are the major studio owners and companies that run the movie industry right now, and they are 20th Century Fox, Warner Brothers, through the Time Warner Company, Sony Pictures through Sony Corporation of America. Universal Studios are related to NBC Universal. Walt Disney Pictures, which has been dominating the acquisition of more products and television networks such as ABC, and Paramount, Viacom owns that. So those are your major studio owners in the film, and they help push the final product into the theaters. If they are independent producers, they can do that on their own, but usually they negotiate and have that handled. So this is what you have now to set you up for the final exam, which is over chapters 6 through 11. It'll be due by August 5th at 11 p.m. It'll be opened up at least a week early, if not more. If you need access to it before that, you just get a hold of me and we'll work it out so that you can get it done in a timetable that works best for you. So thanks for taking the course. Thanks for working hard on the group projects and all the other areas. And hopefully you've learned quite a bit about the film industry and how it speaks to people.